We'd like to welcome fans into a special playoff edition of Raider Video Chats with Richmond Raider head coach Bryan Till. Coach, how you doing?
Great to see you, Kyle.
Good to see you too. So, Coach, it's game week. You and the Raiders are fresh off a win over Huff on Friday, and now you're moving into the quarterfinal round of the state playoffs for the second straight season. So you'll be welcoming in the same opponent as last year, Myers Park High School. So Raiders fans and you, I'm sure, and the team remember last year's outcome. So I guess the big question now is, what ways are the Richmond Raiders more experienced and better prepared to take on the Mustangs a year later?
Well, I think there's a lot of experiences that come along with playing a big game like that. There's some things like them stomping on the R before the game and maybe some interaction between their fans and our fans, some social media stuff. I think we're better prepared to kind of handle the pressure of that stuff. I hope that kind of stuff doesn't happen. It really doesn't have any place in the game. But, if something like that was to happen, I think our kids are better prepared to handle those type of emotions, hopefully, than we were last year. Got a lot of guys back on both sides of the ball. And so I think that helps us. Obviously, scheme-wise, knowing them, knowing how good they are, how good, Drake May is at putting the ball in certain places. I think there's a healthy respect there for what they're able to do. And so I think that hopefully that and the speed of the game will be something we're prepared for.
How are you approaching things differently?
I would say, there's not a whole lot different other than telling our guys, hey, avoid the talk, avoid social media, avoid some of the stuff emotionally that goes along with that. So I think that's probably a big thing we're doing, and then just telling them to focus. Making sure we're focusing on what their job is. I think we did that last year, but I think there's a difference in our kids and their approach maybe a little bit this year with some experience.
There's going to be a lot of familiar faces, on your side of the sideline as well as theirs. You mentioned Drake May. There's Moose Muhammad. And they're a very pass-heavy team.
Right.
So just without giving too much away, how are you going to combat their aerial attack this week?
Well, I think you've got to try and get pressure on him. Try and get him off his spot, throwing the ball some, and then you've got to cover well. Whatever that coverage is, you've got to do it. You got to know your assignments and cover well. Give him as little space to catch the ball as possible. I mean, Muhammad has shown he can make catches in some really tight areas and really small spaces, and so is Rooks, and so is Bly, and so is Flip. I mean, all those guys have. They've all been making catches. And so you got to give them as little space and just keep playing all night. I think you got to just continue to play, continue to play, continue to play.
Talking about continuing to play, you guys have the last couple of years have gone through the West, and there have been some remarks made out there about waiting for Richmond to beat a quality Charlotte opponent. So what are your comments to those remarks?
I think that really stems from my first year here when we lost to North Mick, probably the first year, because I think, Butler, and we lost to Butler and North Mick in that 1 year. So I think that probably set people up to think that way, whereas we've beaten Butler the last 2 years, and Butler beat Myers Park in the regular season last year. We beat Huff this year, and Vance beat Mallard Creek. Huff beat Vance a few weeks ago. You're talking about a lot of good teams, and on any given night, anytime you're talking about a good team, you throw Richmond in there with all those guys, all those teams I mentioned. Those are all really good football teams, and what happens is, Charlotte or not, you end up with good. One team's going to win, one team's going to lose. And so I would say, we've won several in the last couple of years, and we've lost some, and I think that's the way it goes when you're playing really good competition.
What do you think the biggest asset is the Raiders bring to those games? They help you win?
Oh, I think definitely a community, is different here than it is for those schools. We're a one-county school. All our kids grow up wanting to be Raiders. So, there's just an adage of if one man defending his home, is worth more than 100 hired soldiers, whatever. And so, I think that's a big thing that our kids are going to fight. And our community is going to show up for these kids. I even know some of the kids from last week, Huff, complimented to some of our boys about the environment that, there and playing in and how cool it was. So that's something I hope is always on our side.
And you kind of segued there into my final question, Coach. Raider Stadium has proven the better part of the last half century to be this boisterous, rowdy, very supportive place to play. So what's your message to Raider Nation here game week against Myers Park?
I mean, just keep showing up, showing out. I mean, you could hear them last week really on the field when plays were made, and it was big, and our kids just feed off of that. I think even several of our kids and coaches were throwing their hands up and down, trying to get the crowd into it because it means something, and they responded well. So we just want to have them continue to respond, continue to come out and support the guys, and just love up and go Raiders.
Of course, a big thanks to Raider head coach Bryan Till for meeting with ROSports. Be sure to head out to Raider Stadium this Friday, the day after Turkey Day, as the number 1 seeded Raiders host number 4 Myers Park at 7:30. Coach, good luck.
Thank you.